rather than being able to calculate and maneuver a conversation or situation for a better outcome? How do I navigate this workspace strategically without losing my connection to myself? This was asked by Courtney in the UK. So it's important to realize that where people are manipulative, calculating, strategic in ways that position themselves ahead of others, it's all done from a place of fear. Where there is plenty, nobody worries. It's like if you come to one of the days where we feed all of the saints, and we feed them every day, but sometimes we feed them outside instead of in their hall, and it's very beautiful. We just did it yesterday, so it's fresh in my memory. We feed all of the saints, we feed the Rishi Kumars, we feed the priests and everybody, and if you forget for a moment about the fact that they're holy people, and you just assume that they are people hungry for lunch, nonetheless, knowing that everybody's walking through with ever refillable buckets full of vegetables and dal and kheer and chapatis and rice pulao and whatever it is that they're serving. They sit very happy and they sing and they chant before the food comes. And again, forget for a moment the fact that they're holy people. Just even if you just think of them as normal people even, they're able to be peaceful. And we've done these bandaras all the time with lots of local poor people who are not holy people, not priests, not the saints, not the Rishi Kumars, just local hungry people. And what you find is, as they see lines of people waiting to serve them, getting buckets full of food, big buckets, and huge vats of food being cooked, they sing and they chant while the food is being served. There's an ease, there's a joy, there's a peace, even in those who are just hungry poor people, who God knows when the last time that they had, a good meal was. Where there's a limited amount of food, let's say that in rushes. We saw that in times of the tsunami, when we were doing relief work after the tsunami. The trucks would come in of food and people would literally throng to them, pushing each other out of the way. Not because they're bad people, but because they're terrified, if I don't get this food, if they don't have enough, I'm going to die or my family's going to die. But when you know there is enough, when you're sitting in a bandar and you're being fed by people with constantly refilled buckets of food, nothing to stress, nothing to worry, nobody to push out of the way, because there's enough food for everyone. They're going to keep bringing around chapatis until you say no more. But if there's a limited amount of food and you don't have another way of getting it, you see people, they push each other out of the way. See it happen and you'll see fights. There have been people killed trying to fill up buckets of water because they are afraid that if they don't get it, they're going to die. Now you flash over to Courtney's question about the workplace. People who are violent, even if not in action, it's not that they're actually beating you, but just in their way of being, in their strategic maneuvering, in their pushing you out of the way, in their manipulation. It's all coming from a place of fear. If I don't position myself as the most important person in this company, oh my God, what if I get fired? And it's not only about the money, because a lot of people could go out and just get another job. She doesn't mention where she works, but, entity that's wrapped up for a lot of us in that place. And if you're a new person in that space, and oh my God, maybe you're actually smart and capable, well, that's a threat to people, whether it's the most important or the number one or whatever it is. So recognize that it's coming from a place of fear. They're bad people. Even the people who quite literally kill someone else in line for a bucket of water are not bad people. Yeah, we could say you're a murderer, but they're still not a bad person. They didn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to kill somebody today. It was their fear, their terror that caused them to do it. And so when you find people who are acting in ways that are less and kind and gentle and collaborative and cooperative, recognize there's fear at play. Definitely don't buy into it. Recognize from yourself, okay, what if? It's a brand new workplace. Maybe you don't know how it goes. If you're not number one, are you going to lose your job? If you don't maneuver to push other people out of the way, are you in danger of losing your job? And if so, do you have another job you could get? Because simply thinking it through like this can help alleviate your fear, and then can help you realize there's absolutely no need for you to engage in that. But recognize it for what it is. Definitely do not lose who you are. There's that beautiful story I love of the saint and the scorpion. The saint who's bathing in the river and sees a scorpion drowning, and he goes to save it, and he picks it up to put it on the riverbed. And the scorpion does what scorpions do, which is sting him. And he goes, ow! And he flings his hand like that, and the scorpion falls back in the water. And again he goes to pick it up again. And again the scorpion stings him. And again he flails his arm in pain. And again the scorpion falls in the water. And the cycle goes on several times, and finally a man who's sitting on the edge of the river says to the saint, Baba, let him drown. He's just going to keep stinging you. What are you doing? And the saint says, he's stinging me because it's his dharma to sting. He's not leaving his dharma. My dharma is to save. So if he's not leaving his dharma, why should I leave my dharma? And while it's certainly not anybody's dharma to be calculating and maneuvering and manipulative and pushy and whatnot, it's certainly your dharma to live in alignment with your values, your ethics, your truth. And regardless of what it is that's making them live out of alignment with that, there's absolutely no reason for you to let go of it. And it's why we don't all become best friends with everyone we work with. Sometimes if you're lucky, you'll have friends or acquaintances, people you eat lunch with or have a cup of tea at the tea break with, or coffee at the coffee break, whatever it may be, or chat over the water cooler type of thing. But make sure that you're not trying to squeeze something out of them that isn't necessary. and that isn't necessarily what they have available in that moment. Find that inner sense of fulfillment, that inner sense of connection in other ways. And chances are, I'm sure, I would hope, that not everyone is like this. And that there are at least some who are not, who you can connect more deeply with. But by all means, never give up who you are. Just because other people, whether it's a workplace situation, whether it's a school peer pressure situation, whether it's a different type of community situation, just because people are acting in a way that isn't in alignment with your truth, and it may make you feel like the odd person out, it's much better to feel like that than to give up who you are. So always, always, always stay true to yourself. And, maybe help them understand that, hey, you're not there to take their jobs. You're not there to push them out of the way. You're there to bring a new skill set, new abilities. I mean, presumably that's why you were hired. The company already had them. But you've been hired to bring in a new skill set. New abilities, new gifts, new vision. So help them understand that. Maybe that'll help everybody be able to kind of exhale. And maybe it won't. Maybe that is too deeply embedded into their culture. And that's also okay. But at least you'll know that you've shared your truth. And ultimately that's what matters most. Beautiful. Thank you for that question. And any other questions that anyone here has? We have these 2 microphones, one on each side. So if you've got a question, just feel free to come up to either of the microphones. Yes, please.
Good. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm a traveler, kind of, and then I feel like I'm looking for something else always, no? Some excitement, some growth, some learning, more and more, no? It's like practicing asanas, and instead of staying in the asanas, pushing myself more and more to reach better state, always better and better.
Yeah.
So how to stay in the asana, how we are, and enjoy that instead of...
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So there's a teaching in the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali that says, Sthira Sukham Asanam. And it means that which is stable and happy is asana. And that which brings stability and happiness is asana. And so, yes, sure, there are styles of yoga, lineages of yoga that are focused on a flow. But even in those lineages, you have to learn to find stability. Because without stability, you can't find happiness. Or at least not stable, lasting happiness. If you're in a constant state of motion, imagine just for a moment, for example, let's say you're doing Surya Namaskar, you're doing a sun salutation, and you're moving very quickly through all of the different asanas. Well, maybe one of them brings you happiness, right? Maybe you love bending over in Uttanasana and you get that great stretch, and for a split second you feel, but then immediately there you are going into the next move. So it's not a lasting happiness. It's just momentary, it's fleeting. In order to find that which is stable, you have to also be able to hold the asanas. And that's why in all of the traditional lineages of yoga, the ones that are really focused not just on your waist or your hips or your weight or getting you to sweat or things like that, but that are actually focused on the spiritual aspects as well. There's always, always teachings and practices. Holding it. Holding the body. Holding the breath in different forms of pranayama. Because it gives us an experience of stillness. And so I think it's beautiful to have that yearning. And it sounds like you've already got an asana practice, which is great. And one of the beautiful things about a yoga practice is the whole point of it is it's supposed to stay with us when we get off the mat. And so you should bring into your yoga practice staying. Maybe you get, an alarm. Set it for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour. Pujya Swamiji, my guru, used to stand in Vrikshasana, in tree pose, for 11 hours a day. That's stability. Something far beyond stability as well, of course, but it's a spiritual practice. It's not about loosening your hips. It's a spiritual practice. But it doesn't have to be 11 hours. It doesn't even have to be 11 minutes. It can be 5 minutes. Set an alarm. Get into your Trikonasana and hold it for 5 minutes. But you find something really interesting. Even in that stillness, it's not about becoming a stone. Because as you hold the asana, there's always an internal adjustment. It's not you go into it and then you don't budge. There's always an adjustment. You're always re-remembering the back heel, the ball of the front leg, right? The rotation of this hip, the extension of the arm. Otherwise the body kind of falls in on itself. So even as you're holding it, there's a constant internal readjustment. And that's really the teaching for life as well, which is we become still in order to have that subtle readjustment. See, if I'm going through sun salutations at a beat like this, there's no time for adjustment. There's barely time to actually straighten my legs. It's a great workout. It achieves something different. It gets the energy going. It gets a flow going in the circulatory system. It opens channels. It's wonderful. But it's a different practice. In order to have the subtle ability to adjust within, I have to become still. In meditation, we are adjusting in the mind. Right? The sutras talk about the fluctuations of the mind stuff. So we are learning to adjust them gently, slowly, gently, just by a constant return of the awareness, a constant return. And in the same way we adjust the internal aspects of the body, and what you'll find is, even in your asana, an ability to go deeper and deeper. You hold that uttanasana for 5 minutes, and you're in a completely different asana at the end of the 5 minutes than you were when you got in. And it's given you something much deeper than just flowing through it. So I would say begin with the practice in your asana, because it will give you a foundation then to find it in life. And there isn't a problem with traveling, with growth, with learning. It's wonderful. And there have to be different stages. We move through times of great change, and then we move through times of stability. If you look at the seasons, it's what the seasons do. There's times of great flowering, great fruiting, great growth. We have monsoon seasons. I remember being in India, my first monsoon season. I had been out July and August. I came back end of August at the end of the monsoon. And I felt like I had walked into my own little shop of horrors, where little plants along the side of the road that had been just kind of shrubs when I left India 6-7 weeks earlier had grown into these enormous trees, plants. I mean, literally, it was like little shop of horrors all over the place. That's a season of growth. And then we have dry seasons and cold seasons, where everything kind of quiets, slows down. You don't plant trees in the wintertime. Ground is too hard. And it's important in our life to also give ourselves some of that time. So by all means, keep having times of growth. But just make sure that you also have times of integration. You know, one of the reasons that we sleep, one of the innumerable benefits that sleep does for us, is it actually enables us to filter and integrate that which we've learned in the day. That which is not important to remember, we lose. It gets literally like, excuse me, it gets literally like digested. Becomes, kind of the excreta of the brain, literally. Unnecessary stuff gets reabsorbed, excreted, unnecessary. And that which is important, those connections get strengthened and solidified into stronger learning, stronger memories. If you never slept, not only would you actually die, but long before you actually died, what you would find is you couldn't remember anything. It's why when kids try to cram for exams by staying up all night, it might work for 24 hours. Stay up all night, take the exam at 8 a.m. If you've got enough caffeine in your system, you might be okay. But a week later, give them the exam again without letting them go back to their books, and you find nobody remembers anything. Because those memories never had a chance to actually solidify because there was no sleep. So you're learning, yes, but is that learning percolating down into the more permanent, deep levels of who you are? Or is it staying just on the level of kind of exam cramming? You learn something and then you're moving again before you have the opportunity to integrate it. So look at bringing some integration. Travel, move, and then stop. And integrate. And when you feel integrated, travel again, learn more, experience more, and then stop and integrate. And allow yourself to really have the benefit of all of that which you're giving yourself. And the other last benefit of that is, if it turns out that all of the movement isn't just to learn more and experience more, but if there is any aspect of you that you are running from, you'll feel it, you'll come to see it, you'll know it, and you'll be able to work with it then. Because the last thing you want to do is be running from yourself. And I'm not saying that you necessarily are, I just know that it is something that happens to a lot of us. But if you stop for a while, you hold the asana, you develop a practice of meditation, of pranayama, you allow yourself some time in different places to stop and integrate. If there is something you're running from, you'll see it. And then you'll be able to open to it and work through it. Beautiful, yeah. Other questions? Yes. And then you.
Namaste. So it has been close to 3-4 weeks I've been here, and I'm trying to practice meditations, right, in the morning and the evening. And before this, I've been to Vipassana. So I did that 10-day course there, and I actually just in one session I got this glimpse of that nothingness, or like I don't know what was that, but just for a few seconds, right? So coming here when I'm practicing meditations, in the past few weeks what I'm observing is that when I'm doing my work, regular work, that awareness comes back and focus on my breath, right? And I just keep going
Beautiful.
into that. But at the same time, I have this conflicting thought that like on which I should focus on right now. Should I be doing this or should I be focusing on my work, right? So you have this conflicting thought, like how should I be usually or in that moment? So if you could help me to find the balance.
Sure. So meditation is not anti-work. Ultimately, ideally, we should be able to bring that state of pure awareness into everything that we're doing. That's the goal. The goal shouldn't be my meditation or my work. Yes, there's only a limited amount of time in the day we can actually sit like this. But that power of awareness, of presence, is something we should bring into everything we're doing. And it's why, I don't know about the Vipassana retreat that you went to, but it's why on a lot of meditation retreats, they will give you karma yoga to do. You wash dishes, you sweep floors, you clean toilets, you cut vegetables, you do other things. And it's not, this is your meditation time, and then this is the time when you really should be focused on the dishes you're washing. But it's how can you wash dishes in that state of full awareness that you have while you're meditating? How can you bring that state into whatever you're doing? Now, sometimes we have jobs or hobbies that pull all of our awareness into them. You're doing accounting. You're doing some kind of math or science or, whatever it may be. Entrepreneurship, you're inventing something that really takes all of your attention. Beautiful. As long as you don't lose that connection. Now, there are times, and it's what we refer to as the flow state, where when you're doing something, whether it could be art, it could be making music, it could be something in work, it could be writing, in which what you are doing literally becomes so meditative that you totally lose yourself into it. And that's actually a very beautiful state to go into. Because what's happened is your awareness has flowed straight into that, fully and completely. There's no longer a painter and a painting and paints, there is just painting. There's no longer a poet and a poem and writing that is happening. There is just poetry. And that's a very, very, very beautiful state to be able to get into. So if you find whenever that happens, allow it, it's beautiful. It makes you know that you're really doing that, which is your flow. But for the rest of it, whatever you're doing, keep a sense of awareness. Yeah, it may be a challenge. How to balance and account at the same time being aware. But it's like juggling, right? When you start to juggle, you can barely keep 2 balls up in the air. But then you see these good jugglers and they've got 8, 9 balls, and then they've got 8, 9 flames and torches and glass bottles and whatnot. It's just practice. They weren't born being able to do it. They don't have some juggling gene. They just practiced. So in the same way, practice. Yes, I am balancing numbers. And I'm breathing. There is an in-breath and an out-breath. Just as there is a product and a sum. And just as you're aware of the product or the sum, so you are aware of the in-breath and the out-breath. So you are aware of the hand on the keyboard that is hitting the plus sign. Can you feel it happening? Can you be aware of the musculature that is needed to hit that plus sign? So bring it into whatever you do. And it's definitely not easy. But it's a fantastic practice. And it enables your work to become meditation as well. Great. Yeah. Because ultimately that's the point, is not to compartmentalize our lives, but to have them flow seamlessly together. Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Jai Ganga Maiya, Har Har Gange. My question is primarily towards the materialistic world. Money is the root of all evil, and yet we say the more the merrier.
Say that again. Money is the root of all evil, but
And the more the merrier.
the more the merrier.
People do not want to die in the hospital, on the hospital bed, and yet they feel that it's better to die in a Rolls Royce. So this kind of a conflicting, this kind of a paradoxical situation in life is for most of us. So how do we try and balance this? How do we try and resolve this? It's all a game of mind, so I just need to know.
Yeah, this is what we call Maya, illusion. It's what we call avidya, agyan, that lack of deep knowledge, deep wisdom. And it's why we go on a path of obtaining gyan. What you're talking about is the nature of the mind. As you say, this is true for everyone. We live in a world where that's what the mind wants. It wants more and more and more, better, 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 and cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. It's just the nature of the mind. But this is why we have spiritual practice, is to bring us into a state of wisdom. That's what we have discrimination for. It's why we meditate, to open the third eye. It's why we come to satsang. It's why we listen to spiritual discourse. It's why we listen to katha. It's why we read scriptures. It's why we have introspection. So we ask ourselves, okay, bought the Rolls Royce today. I'm the big man on campus. Is it enough? Can I stop? And every day we ask ourselves, is it enough? And if not, when will it be enough? And eventually, you realize it's never enough. Because before you have the Rolls Royce, you think, just when I get the Rolls Royce, then it'll be enough. But then you get it and it's never enough. I was speaking recently with a good friend of mine, and we were speaking about a mutual good friend and sort of the nature of the mind. And this mutual good friend is super, 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 super wealthy, multi-millionaire. And she's known him for a lot longer than I have. And she was telling me how she remembers decades ago that she had asked him, like, when will you feel that you're really a success, that like you're totally set? And he said, when I have this type of a house, this type of a car, and this much money in the bank. And then when he got that, she said to him, okay, now you have that. Do you feel like a success yet? He said, well, not yet. Now if I have this type of a house and that type of a car and this much money in the bank, then I'll feel like I'm there. And she was talking about how during the decades that she's known him, the house has grown, the cars have grown, the amount in the bank has grown, and it's never enough. And it reminds me, she was sharing it with me because we were talking about that never-ending desire for more and more and more. And I shared with her how after I had been in India for maybe a year or two, I was back in America and I conducted this personal scientific experiment. And the experiment was I spoke to about 7, 8, 9, 10 different people I knew, all of whom were at the absolute highest of their area. So someone who was a tenured professor at Stanford, someone who was the chairman of the board of a Forbes 500 company, someone who was a successful actress in Hollywood, someone who was a singer with a song in the top 10, someone who was a professional basketball player. All of the different spheres, business, sports, academia, entertainment. And they were all people I knew really well. And so I was able to do this experiment in which I asked them all, in the middle of a conversation about kind of how are you, here's how I am, been a long time. I was able to ask them, are you happy? And that was actually my core question for them. Are you happy? And what I got was every single person gave me one of two answers. Either I will be happy when, fill in the blank. Their blanks were different. They wanted different things. But every one of them was either I will be happy when, they were waiting on just one more thing to happen, or I would be happy if there was just one thing blocking it. And you realize now if people at that level still have one thing between them and happiness, it's never enough. So the journey from agyan to gyan, from ignorance to wisdom, is when we realize enough has nothing to do with the actual amount we have, and everything to do with how we feel about it. There's a great story of a king who was looking for happiness, and he had everything. He was a king, but he wasn't happy. And he sent all of his ministers and men and people out there to find happiness for him. He said, just find somebody who's happy and bring me his shirt. And then I will wear the shirt of the happy person and I will be happy. And all of his people went out, and they, of course, first go to all of the richest people, the most successful people. But nobody's happy. Finally, one of them is just too embarrassed to go back to the kingdom. He feels like a failure. He's worried he's going to be beheaded. And so he's just kind of wandering through the village. And he sees this man dancing in ecstasy. Just dancing and dancing in ecstasy. And he says to the man, "Are you happy?" And the man, "Yes, oh, I'm in bliss, I'm in ecstasy, happy. There is nothing for me. I'm in everlasting bliss." And now this guy's really happy. Finally, he's found someone. And he says, can you just give me a shirt? I need a shirt for the king. And the man says, "I have no shirt." And he keeps dancing and dancing and dancing. And I love the story because, of course, shirts don't steal our happiness. But the yearning for more and more and more certainly does. And you certainly find more and more in life that it's not that those with a lot can't be happy. Of course they can. But that those who are focused on the attainment of more so they can be happy are almost always not happy. And those who are looking in a different direction tend to find it. So, yeah, let your nightly introspection question be, is it enough yet? And if it's not, write down on a piece of paper what would be enough. What's going to be enough? And then, if you don't want to wait till you have it, find someone who does. Are they happy? Ask them. It's a little shortcut. Otherwise, you've got to wait till you actually earn it to discover it doesn't make you happy. But you can shortcut by finding someone, if they're honest, who has that much. Does it make them happy? The answer is always no. So it's up to you how long you want to stay in that illusion and when you want to break free. And it doesn't mean you can't have a good job. It doesn't mean you can't continue to earn money. Of course you can. Doesn't mean you have to become a guy with no shirt dancing in the jungles. But it means that that's certainly a possibility. It's not going to make you feel like you've abandoned something. And it means that whatever you do, it's enough. So you get to come home on time. You get to spend the weekends with your family or doing seva or being in nature. You don't have to keep constantly pushing yourself to earn more, earn more, earn more, earn more. You get off the treadmill. Right? They say the rat that wins the rat race is still a rat. The only way not to be a rat is to get out of the race. Right? Beautiful. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. And I look so forward to being together tomorrow.